Good late afternoon, everybody. I think we may have more turnout for our annual meetings, but I'm not sure. I'm John Sherman. I'm the chair of the Regional Solid Waste Board for Davidson County. I wanted to welcome all of you. Wanted to especially welcome our board members. I'm not sure all who are here. I'm seeing our newest board member, Guy Patterson. Thank you, Guy. Robert Deal, Jack Vanetta, Miss Anna's here. Am I missing anybody else? So we have some of our board here, and hopefully more will arrive. I know we have a couple who are out of town I assume on vacation. Before I get started, I also just wanted to thank both Sharon Smith and her crew for helping really pull this meeting together. And those of you of the Solid Waste Board, I'm looking at Robert and Jack. Daniel Lane is not here, and neither is Leslie Alexander. The four of them worked with and met a couple times to help put this together, and the next meeting we'll talk about in a minute. As well as just appreciation out to John Vanderhaars and his group for coming and participating in a productive manner. That was helpful. Why we're here tonight is we basically hit a wall here in Nashville with what we're doing with our both on the commercial side and on our municipal side of the waste stream, and we're flat on recycling, and pretty much 5%. It's been 5% forever. Well, not quite forever, but for as long as almost anybody in this room can remember. And we know we need to do something different. And I was, after a couple of we bumped our toes in the last couple of years on some issues, and we realized we need to do something different. And after pretty much everybody on the board and pretty much in the public said, Mr. Chairman, we really need to have some meetings. We got around to it. And we're fortunate tonight to have a couple of individuals with us who can really help us understand on a much bigger palette than what we've been looking at here, at least the board has been looking at, about some different ways of looking at our waste stream and waste management. And I'm going to introduce them in a minute. But I first wanted to say the way we're going to handle tonight is we're going to have both speakers give a 20 to 25 minute presentation. And if they'd like to go longer, they're totally welcome to, because they came a long way for us tonight. So we will give them the time that they need. And so the way we're going to do Q&A, there are cards at the back. If you have questions, right on the cards, Sharon is going to pick them up, and she'll distribute as well as pick them up, and then she'll help me manage the Q&A session that way. It's just it's the most kind of the easiest way to do it. So let me quickly turn to our two speakers. We have two individuals with us tonight, as I've already said, who are both well-informed, outstanding, very active in their own fields. The first speaker tonight is going to be John Skinner, who's the CEO of what we call SWANA. I guess Sharon said she calls him Mr. SWANA. I'm not sure if that's quite right or not, but SWANA is the Solid Waste Association of North America. John's been around the block and has had lots of experience in the solid waste arena, running SWANA since 1996. Before that, he was with EPA. Before that, he, I don't want to go too far back, but with GE. He's not only been involved in the corporate side and the government side and now in the trade association side, but he's also widely published. So I'll introduce our next speaker after John finishes. So John?
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to be talking about some national trends and some international trends in waste management and some of the issues that are occurring, but I'm going to do it with a particular perspective. I wrote an editorial for our magazine about a year ago, and I called it The Transition from Waste Management to Resource Management in North America. And I pulled together some examples of that transition, and I got a very positive reaction to it. A lot of people sent me more information about seeing this in their own community. So I've been collecting that information, and I've put it all together, and it shows you some very, very dramatic things that are happening, some things that are happening that are very, very new in the field. I've been working in the field for many, many years, and a lot of these things 5, 8 years ago just weren't there. This is the outline of the presentation that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to tell you a little bit about SWANA, just so you know what we do and where I'm coming from. I'm going to explain this transition from waste management to resource management. And I'm going to talk about all of these topics, and I'll define them as I get to them. Product stewardship, EPR, which is extended producer responsibility, zero waste, which you've probably heard about. I'm going to talk about trends in recycling and composting, trends in waste to energy, some of the new technologies which are called waste conversion technologies, which produce different products and fuels from waste. And I'm also going to talk about the transition of landfills to resource recovery facilities. Let's start about SWANA. We are a non-for-profit association. We're not a trade association. We don't represent the solid waste industry. There's another association that does that. Our mission is professional development of our members. And we have 8,000 individual members in the United States and Canada and a new chapter in the Caribbean. Out of those 8,000, 65% work for the public sector. They are county officials, city officials, state officials, and 35% work for the private sector, and they represent the solid waste management companies, but also the consultants and the equipment salesmen and the other folks in the field. The important point is that there are no companies or agencies that are members of SWANA. Everybody's a member as an individual, okay? I said we have 45 chapters, which are mini SWANA in many, many states and provinces in Canada. And again, our goal is professional development of our members. This is our mission statement, to advance the practice of environmentally and economically sound management of municipal solid waste in North America. This mission statement it came long before I joined the association, and it is very forward-looking when you think about it. If we were to rewrite this mission statement today, we'd probably say we want to advance the practice of sustainable management of municipal solid waste in North America, because in order to be sustainable, you have to be both environmentally sound and economically sound. So when this was written 15 to 20 years ago, they were thinking about sustainable practices or starting to think about sustainable practices. This is a list of what we do. I'm not going to go through it, but we do all sorts of things at a professional development association. We do training and education of our members, opportunities for them to learn from each other as well as learn from us. Okay, this is the transition from waste management to resource management. It's a transition where people used to think of themselves as a disposal-oriented industry. And it's a transition from that to an industry that is thinking more and more of itself as a comprehensive resource management industry. What I mean by that is people that are involved in waste management are realizing that they are really suppliers of raw materials and energy resources, not only managers or disposers of discarded wastes. And they have to realize that their goal is to produce very high quality, reliable supplies of recycled materials, reliable supplies of renewable energy and recovered products. So it's a mind change that is occurring, and it's occurring in many, many different ways in many different parts of the country. Let me talk about, well, these are some examples of them, and I will go through these in more detail in each of my following slides. The first is this whole area of product stewardship, where mainly in Canada, but in the United States as well, but not to a great extent, states and provinces are recognizing that discarded products are in fact potential material and energy resources. I'll talk about the programs that they're setting up to manage those discarded products. Zero waste, the whole idea of understanding that waste generation represents an economic inefficiency, and by driving out waste, by reducing waste, you make yourself more efficient from an economic perspective. The standard recycling, composting, and waste-to-energy type of technologies, which have been around for a long time, but very significant changes and directions in those technologies are occurring. The so-called conversion technologies, which I'll go into in more detail. You might have heard the names gasification, pyrolysis, plasma arc, anaerobic digestion are all technologies that attempt to derive the highest value from discarded materials. And then finally, even a landfill can be part of a resource management strategy in terms of the methane gas that's being produced is a resource that's being produced even long after the wastes have been disposed of. I'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail. Let's start with product stewardship. This started as a voluntary effort, and now we're beginning to see mandatory programs at the regional and local level. And when they become mandatory, they're called extended producer responsibility, where the producer is required to take certain actions with respect to the products that they produce. This started focusing on some specific products, and the first ones were computers and electronics, and then mercury-containing products such as thermometers and thermostats. And then other individual products that were fairly difficult to dispose of in a landfill, like tires and batteries and pharmaceuticals and things like that. But it's now becoming a much more extensive program than the initial products that it started on. I'll show you some examples of that. This represents a very fundamental change in the way wastes are managed, at least product waste are managed, away from a system which is run by local government and maybe contracted out to the private sector, but it's paid for by the citizens either through their taxes or through some user charges, towards one that recognizes the producer's responsibility. And there are two areas where the producer is responsible. First of all, to design better products. Design products that are easier to recyclable, that use less waste. And I'll give you an example of that in a second. The second is to involve the producer in the collection and recycling of the discarded products. And I'll explain how that's done. One example of the need for better products is in the area of beverage containers. There's a number of beverage containers companies coming out with a plastic sheath around the plastic bottle. And they do that for advertising, for making the product look more attractive. That makes recycling of that bottle very, very difficult because the resin is very different than the resin in the bottle. It's very hard to get the sheath off. It doesn't float. So it's a very difficult product to recycle. If the producer was responsible for making sure that that product was recyclable, they might do something different, and they might change their product design so that would be what would happen. And that's the purpose of this whole product stewardship effort. This is a map of Canada. A lot of people don't recognize it without the U.S. hanging off the bottom. And these are the different provinces in Canada, and by the icons, these are the different products by which they are requiring the producer to take a role in recycling the products. And it's different from province to province, and that's one of the issues in Canada, that producers have to respond to different requirements in different provinces. But you can see the extensive list of products beyond what you would think of originally that they're using product stewardship for. Here's a map for the U.S., and it's showing it differently. The different colors tell you the number of products that each of the states have for a product stewardship program. The gray states, and Tennessee is one of them, has none, 0. The blue has 1, and it's usually computer electronics and discarded televisions and things like that. Green is 3, and it goes all the way up to the purple, which is 6, and California is the state that has 6 product stewardship laws. But these are happening very, very quickly. In the last 2 months, I saw 3 states have paint recycling programs, product stewardship for paint recycling programs, and 1 state, Connecticut, has for mattresses. So it's extending from the original products to a whole array of products. It's an important trend. We need to watch it. I don't know whether it's going to catch on in the U.S. to the extent that it's caught on in Canada, but it just changes the entire nature of your collection and your recycling programs. Let's talk about zero waste. 5 years ago, I thought zero waste was a pie-in-the-sky type of concept, something that was advocated by environmental groups that were very interested in pushing this concept, but not really practical for people to pay a lot of attention to. That has changed. Zero waste is now mainstream, and many communities and many industries have committed to zero waste and have developed zero waste plans. San Francisco is one of them, and you're going to hear about their program. This works very well in an industry, in an industrial facility where the owners of that facility can influence the type of materials that come in. They can influence what they do with those materials, and they can influence where they send them. And they can really design waste out of their system. The definition of zero waste, and this is a definition, if you see the acronym at the bottom, ZWIA, that's the Zero Waste International Alliance, is designing and managing products and processes to avoid and eliminate waste and conserve and recover all resources and not to burn or bury them. Zero waste advocates are generally against landfills. Zero waste advocates are generally against waste-to-energy facilities. They attempt to move in the direction of zero waste through reduce, reuse, and recycle. There's another concept that I'm seeing catching on a bit as well, and it's a simpler concept. It's zero waste to landfills, which in addition to reduce, reuse, and recycle, also incorporates incineration with energy recovery and conversion technologies. And I'm more comfortable with that as a process. I think that has much more potential for eliminating waste. Here is where we stand in the United States with respect to recycling, combustion with energy recovery, and landfilling. And this is from US EPA. It's the 2010 data. They came out a week ago with 2011 data, but it hasn't changed things very, very much. And you can see currently we're landfilling about 55% of our solid waste nationwide using the EPA numbers. Recycling and composting together about 34%, and waste to energy is about 12%. And you can see how it's changed over the last 20 or 30 years, from 1960 to today. And you can see how, for a while, waste generation was increasing very rapidly, and now it's starting to level off. And it's pretty flat for the last couple of years. A little bit of ups and downs with the economy and things like that, but it is not growing at the rate that it was growing earlier. And recycling and composting have really caused it to slow down, along with waste to energy. But we're only halfway there because we're still landfilling half of our waste on a nationwide basis. Let me go over each of these areas, and let's start with recycling and composting. From the previous slide, out of the 250 million tons that are generated every year, 85 million were recycled and composted in 2010, and that gives us the 34% national recycling rate. These are the trends that I'm seeing in recycling and composting. First of all, the concept of single-stream recycling collection is becoming more and more dominant in the industry. This is where you put all of your recyclables in one container. You don't separate them out into separate containers. And the reason that it's becoming more and more prevalent is because you only need one truck, and it's very easy for the consumer to do. All of your recyclables goes into one container. You don't have to separate them in different containers and think about which goes where. We've also seen very significant improvements in the performance of MRFs. MRFs are material recovery facilities. The technology has developed very rapidly. The facilities are very efficient. They have very low residue, and they produce very high products from the single-stream material that they bring in. And that's occurred over just the last 5 or 6 years. Some of these MRFs now are using fiber optics, optical sorting to sort the different resins of plastics, where they can sense using the optical sorting, they can sense the resin and they can separate it in different directions. They're doing that on glass as well. That technology was not used at all in the near past. Third significant trend is the area of food waste collection and recovery of food waste. And you're going to hear about this in the San Francisco case. They're one of the leaders in this area. I was amazed when I looked in Biocycle magazine, and they said there were 150 communities that were separately collecting food wastes from residents, not from food processing facilities, but household food waste was being separately collected in 150 communities. That is a change that has occurred very, very recently. Half of those facilities are on the West Coast, not only in California, but in Oregon and Washington as well. And a lot of them are small, but communities all over the country are very seriously thinking about food waste collection. The organic material is probably the last frontier of recycling. Along with that, what I'm seeing is also a trend. If you separate out your recyclables, if you separate out your food waste and your lawn waste, you don't have much left. And the frequency of collection is changing. It used to be at least once a week. I'm seeing once every 2-week collection becoming more and more prevalent. In some communities, in Washington, D.C., they collect trash twice a week from our homes. That's totally unnecessary. And twice a month collection is something that's becoming more and more used. Let me talk about waste-to-energy facilities, and I want to define this. This is incineration. This is like what you had here in the thermal plant in Nashville. It is incineration of the material that's generated after recycling. So after you separate out your recyclables, you incinerate the remaining material in modern furnaces with state-of-the-art pollution controls, and there are federal standards that these facilities have to comply with. Energy is produced in the form of electricity and steam driving a generator, a turbine generator, and producing electricity. And there's also recycling of the ferrous materials from the ash and sometimes the non-ferrous and the glass as well. There are 86 facilities in the United States, in 24 states, and they process 29 million tons, which is about 12% of the waste generated. These technologies have a very successful track record and very successful experience in many communities in this city, in this country. And these plants, EPA has indicated that they are cleaner than the majority of coal-fired power plants. That's mainly because there are no standards that apply to certain pollution from coal-fired power plants, and those standards do apply to waste-to-energy facilities. The energy produced is considered renewable energy under federal law and under some state law. There's renewed interest in this technology in the United States, and I've seen expansions in some existing facilities. 4 of them are listed on this slide. These are major expansions of the facilities. These are facilities that are installing entirely new furnace lines and are increasing their capacity by 50%. In some cases, they're doubling their capacity. And in all of these instances, they've been very well accepted by the community because the existing facility has had a very good track record. They've operated well for 25 years, very reliable, the costs are affordable, and so there is a lot of citizen support for expanding these facilities. There are 2 new facilities that are coming online, one in Palm Beach County, Florida, which is a brand new 3,000 ton per day facility, and the county down there is going to be a regional energy producer. They have a long-term contract with Florida Power and Light to produce electricity over the next 25 years from this facility. Another one in Durham, Ontario, and then 6 in the planning stages. Worldwide, in Europe, there are 431 of the waste-to-energy plants as compared to 86 in the United States, and I'm talking about the European Union, which is roughly the same size as the U.S. But worldwide, there are 800 facilities in 40 countries, and this market is expected to grow. This group, Pike Research, that tracks these facilities from the $6 billion market that it is today to a $30 billion market in the early 2020s. So it's a technology which is used in the U.S., but it is used more extensively around the world. Let me talk about the conversion technologies. These are new technologies that convert solid waste into both industrial chemicals and into fuels. Now, the people that design these facilities and market these facilities will tell you they're not combustion facilities, they're not incinerators, they're not burning the waste. This is not incineration. Well, if you're producing fuel, you're going to burn it somewhere. Maybe you're not burning it at the plant, but if you're producing a fuel, you're producing something that's going to be combusted. But one of the marketing angles on this is that it is not incineration. I've listed the types of technologies that are generally put in this category: gasification, pyrolysis, plasma arc, hydrolysis, anaerobic digestion. Some people consider that in, some people consider it not a conversion technology. The potential for these technologies is that the fuels and the chemicals that they produce are very high value, if they work and if they're cost effective. But the materials that they're trying to produce are very high values. And that will just change the entire economics of waste management if they are successful. The situation is, though, that there's very little track record of any of these facilities, not only in the United States, worldwide. People talk about the fact that these facilities are in existence in Europe and in Japan, and I've been to the facilities in Europe and Japan, and they're not operating on municipal solid waste. And they're not operating continuously. A lot of them are pilot plants. A lot of them are small. They're operating on special waste streams, such as forest residues. So there's not a lot of data on these facilities, cost data, performance data, environmental data, but a number of them are being built. And so we have to watch these very, very carefully in the next couple of years and see what they look like when they are operating at full scale. So this is an area that's very, very new and developing very, very quickly. Okay. This, I know, is a lot of information. And I want to walk you through it because I think it's showing us something that's very, very significant. My organization, SWANA, is a member of the International Solid Waste Association. And we are the national member for the United States and for Canada it's called ISWA, the International Solid Waste Association. And I was able to get this data from ISWA and all of the other members. And what I've plotted along the bottom axis, starting on this side, your left, moving over in this direction, are the names of 35 countries around the world. And I was able to obtain the data from these countries, and it shows you the percent by which they use recycling, landfilling, and waste to energy. And I've arrayed the data from the ones that landfill the most. Landfill is the red bar in the middle. Blue is waste to energy, and green coming down from the top is recycling. And I've arrayed it from the most landfill, where you can see the mostly 90% a reddish bar, all the way up to the least landfill, which gets pretty close to zero waste. The most landfill are countries like Lithuania, Bulgaria, Greece, Turkey, some of the Eastern European countries. And when they say they're doing 90% landfill, they're not doing landfilling like we're doing here in the United States. They're doing uncontrolled dumping. And there's very, very little recycling in those countries. It's probably just pickers that are scavenging the material. At the other end of the slide, you have Japan, Singapore, Denmark, Sweden, the Netherlands, and other countries which have an awful lot of waste to energy, an awful lot of recycling, and very, very little landfilling. The United States is right in the middle. And this is not the EPA data. This is other data that people use from Biocycle magazine, but it's close in terms of percentage of the waste stream. I think there are several messages that you get from this. The first is that if you really want to reduce the amount of material that you're landfilling, you need a combination of recycling and energy recovery. It doesn't have to be energy recovery like waste to energy. It could be conversion technologies. It could be anaerobic digestion. But you need to have a strategy to deal with the material that's left over after you recycle as much as you can. So any strategy to move towards zero waste has to combine the waste to energy types of technologies along with the recycling technologies. The other thing that I think you can draw from this slide is that recycling and waste to energy are compatible. They're used in many, many countries together, and they are very, very effective in reducing the amount of material that's going to landfill. So very, very important messages on this slide, and I think it shows you where things are going. Let me just talk a little bit about landfills, and then I'll wrap it up and let Julie come up and talk. Landfills also can be part of a resource management strategy. We have to have standards that protect human health and the environment, and we have the subtitle D standards here, which are national standards for landfills enforced by the states. We also need to have programs that reduce the volume of waste landfilling and the number of landfills. But then we also have to make use of the resource that is generated when you landfill waste, and that is the methane gas that can be used as a fuel. In terms of the reduction in landfilling, on that slide that I showed you that showed from 1960 to 2011, the recycling, the waste to energy and landfilling in the United States, if you look at it real carefully, you can see that 136 million tons were landfilled in 2010, and that was less than went into landfills in 1990. 145 million tons went into landfills in 1990. That's a 7% decline in landfilling from 1990 to 2010, accounting for population increases and increases in the generation of waste. I think this is an unbelievable statistic. We are landfilling less today than we did in 1990, although waste generation has increased by 25% over those 20 years. And that's been picked up by recycling and waste to energy. So it's a very good story. We also have significantly reduced the number of landfills in the United States. People are amazed to hear that we only have about 1,800 landfills in the entire United States for municipal solid waste. Some of them are very large. We had 8,000 in the 1980s, and all of them, many of them closed because they could not comply with the new federal standards. And they couldn't upgrade in an efficient way to do that, and so they closed, and larger ones opened. So the number of landfills have decreased very significantly. And finally, landfill gas is a very unique renewable resource. The gas that comes out of a landfill is 50% methane. Methane is natural gas. It's the same natural gas that you burn in your stoves and in your hot water heaters. And it's derived from the organic material in solid waste, the material that's been disposed of deep in the landfill in an anaerobic state where it forms methane rather than carbon dioxide. There are about 500 projects across the United States where they actively collect that methane and use it as a fuel. The number could be doubled if the financial incentives were there to do it for the remaining landfills that are generating enough waste. Initially, that landfill gas that was collected was used as a boiler fuel or in a furnace to produce heat or process steam or something like that. The second generation of facilities that went in used turbines and engines to burn the methane, drove an electric generator and produced electricity and put it into the grid. So it was generating electricity from the methane. About half of the facilities today are generating electricity instead of using it as the methane as a fuel. But the two significant trends, and I think they're really exciting, is converting of the landfill gas into compressed natural gas so it can be used as a vehicle fuel. And I had the opportunity to visit an operation in DeKalb County, the county operation. They have a huge landfill that has 30 years of waste in it. They're producing landfill gas. They're producing electricity from all of it that they can. They're taking the remainder, putting it into through a cleanup process where it's cleaning up the quality of the gas so they can use it as a vehicle fuel. And they're powering their solid waste transfer facilities, transfer vehicles, and their collection vehicles with the gas that's coming out of the landfill. Talk about closing the loop, taking the gas from the landfill, from the solid waste, to go out and collect more solid waste. And they find that it's a very cost-effective process. The other important trend is cleaning the gas up so it can be injected into pipelines, natural gas pipelines, and then the market is the entire United States. It can go anywhere. So those two technologies are changing the entire nature of this operation. Okay, that's everything I'm going to present. Let me just make a quick conclusion. As you can see, there are a full suite of technologies that maximize reduction of waste, maximize recycling and recovery, but also recovery of material and energy resources. And this is all part of that transition from waste management to resource management. We also have been very successful in reducing landfilling and providing for the disposal of residuals in an environmental sound manner, but also using the resource at the landfill to produce energy as well. And we're also continuing to provide needed waste disposal services, but we're doing it from a different perspective. We're doing it starting from thinking of the material that we're disposing of as a resource and trying to make the best use of it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. It's That's lots of good information, very compressed. Hopefully we can pull on your, just pick your brain some afterwards as well. Remind me, you were talking about landfills, and we were created. These regional boards were created after a passage of a law back in 1992, and that was a time when there was so much clamor about we don't have enough landfill space, and so a lot of the pressure came from that. So it's just interesting to see that that pressure isn't there anymore. So. Let me turn to our next speaker. First, a couple other board members came in. Beth Reardon, hi, thank you for coming. Daniel Lane, thank you, and appreciate you being here. I want to introduce Julie Bryant, who came even further than John. I overheard her say this morning that she got up at 4 a.m., but that's only 6 a.m. here. But Julie's going to talk about some very, I think, some more specific issues having to do with waste. As you may know, she runs the Zero Waste program for the city of San Francisco, as well as managing all of your recycling programs there, I understand. You can give us more. She comes from, as I'm looking across the room, as a lot of us, but clearly with a better paying job for working on recycling than many of us advocated, so hopefully anyway. Julie, please step up, and we'll no doubt have a bunch of questions about zero waste.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Give me just 1 minute. I'm going to plug in my clicker. And I'm probably not going to use the microphone just so I can see all of you better. Let me make sure this works. Oh, it does not. Oh, yes, it does. Okay. Hi. It's great to be here today. Like you said, I'm Julie Bryant, and I work for the City and County of San Francisco's Department of the Environment. And I'm thrilled to be here today to tell you a little bit more about San Francisco's story. I'm just going to tell you about what we've been doing, and hopefully you can learn a little bit, and I will be answering more questions at the end. But I'll give you a little bit of background on San Francisco. I'm going to tell you about our policies, our programs, as well as go over some of the 4 keys to success, and then tell you about what the future has in store for San Francisco and zero waste. With that, we are a unique city, and I want to start by just acknowledging that. We're different in a lot of ways than a lot of other places, so you may or may not be able to apply some of what I'll tell you today to your own programs. But we are actually just 47 square miles. We're surrounded on 3 sides by water. We are a city of just 800,000 people, a little over 800,000 people, and we're very dense. We have a lot of hills, narrow streets, so we're unique in that way. We also are very diverse. We have 45% of our population speaking a language other than English in their home. And I would say we're also a very environmentally aware place. People are concerned with protecting the environment. Finally, this is one of the ways we're very unique. I haven't heard of any other place in the country who's like this, but we have actually only one private refuse hauler for all residential and commercial collection in the city. And they've had a permit, an exclusive permit to haul refuse since 1932. And they're regulated like a utility, like PG&E is in our city, through a legal process that actually takes about a year. We just finished one. So every time they ask for a rate increase, we have to go through all of their financial records, and it's a real interesting process. So we're very different in that way, but as a result, we actually have a very long standing relationship with our partner hauler called Recology, and we're able to get a lot done. They invest a lot of money and infrastructure in our city as a result. We also have a long history of resource recovery, even before 1932. This picture was taken over 100 years ago. We had people, immigrants largely, who came to San Francisco and collected refuse. They were called scavengers, and even back then they were recycling materials, such as rags, glass, and paper. San Francisco also has something called pay as you throw. It's my understanding Nashville does not. But residents and businesses are each charged for the collection of trash based on the volume of trash they generate. And this creates a direct economic incentive to recycle and compost more. Every customer gets a bill from Recology for the refuse collection. And customers can adjust their container sizes or their frequency of pickup to save money. San Francisco and the state also has a long history of resource recovery policies. It all started with AB 939, which was a California state law that required every municipality in the state to divert 50% of the waste from landfill by the year 2000. And for every day a municipality did not comply, the state could fine that city up to $10,000 a day. This was passed in 1989. And San Francisco and the state have surpassed that goal. Once we surpass that goal, the Board of Supervisors, which is equivalent to your city council, said we want to extend our goal. We want to reach 75% by 2010 and zero waste by 2020. And the way we define zero waste is we are facilitating the redesign of products to make them consistent with our 3 R's or 4 R's if you include rot for composting, but durable products, reusable products, products you can recycle, packaging you can recycle, as well as compost. And these are products that, so we hope to have nothing sent to landfill, and that includes nothing sent to high temperature, what we call materials destruction, conversion, waste energy, whatever you want to call it, but we don't do that in the city. We also are known for our sort of relentless experimentation with policy, particularly our bans, and you may have heard of some of them. And you may or may not have that may or may not be politically palatable in your city, but we've done it and it's really helped achieve our goals. We've had a sort of incremental approach with dealing with some certain problem products. We started with styrofoam that was banned from being used for to-go food in all food service establishments. And food service establishments are now required to use only recyclable or compostable food to-go containers. While it's a small percentage of a waste stream, this ban on bottled water was very symbolic. All municipal government in the city is not allowed to spend city money on buying bottled water. So this not only saved money, but it really said we want to promote our wonderfully, deliciously tasting municipal tap water that is healthy and clean. And we generate a lot less bottle waste as a result. The plastic bag bans in San Francisco, we actually have 2. That's like a whole other PowerPoint presentation on its own. It's a really interesting story of how we got to where we were with bag bans, but we were the first city in the nation to bag plastic bans at certain retail establishments. That was just large grocery stores and drugstores in 2007. And then just in 2012, we extended the ban to all retail establishments and required them to charge a minimum of 10 cents on all acceptable checkout bags. So not only did this eliminate non-recyclable plastic bags at a lot of locations, a lot of retail checkout locations, all retail checkout locations, but it also promoted people bringing their own canvas reusable bag. And when you go to almost any grocery store in the city, almost everyone brings their own bag. So it's really reduced waste significantly. We also have a construction and demolition debris recovery ordinance. It's a big mouthful, so I'll say C&D from now on. But construction and demolition debris refuse hauling is the only part of our refuse stream that is not exclusively managed by Recology, our hauling partner. It's actually an open market. So our law around recycling C&D debris is really simple, minimally bureaucratic, but it requires all haulers of C&D to be registered with the city. And when you register, you agree as a transporter to transport all C&D debris to a registered facility, and that you will send nothing directly to a landfill. There's 13 facilities around the Bay Area, very convenient, easy. And every registered facility has shown that they can divert 65% or more C&D debris from the landfill. So they process things such as wood, concrete, asphalt, metals, things like that, and recycle them. Mandatory recycling composting is the most significant law that we've passed, and it was because it had the biggest effect on our landfill stream. We dramatically increased composting, recycling as well when this was passed, but it was the first of its kind in the country. Every person in the city, whether you're a visitor, a resident, a business, you have to recycle and compost. And so that really, really boosted our waste diversion rate. I've said the word diversion a lot. I just want to clarify. Diversion means what we divert from the landfill, what we recycle, compost, or reuse. So this chart, this is kind of a graph of what we've been doing for the last 15 years and how our policies have shaped what where we're at today. But just 15 years ago, we were at 20% landfill diversion, a little over 20%. So pretty low, but in just 15 years, with this sort of incremental approach to dealing with different streams, with policies and programs, we have increased our diversion rate dramatically, and disposal has gone down significantly. Disposal is an even more significant indicator of sustainability. We're at the lowest disposal rate than we've seen in more than 30 years. So we're really proud of that. We are the leader in the nation with waste diversion, and we divert 80% of the material we generate from the landfill. However, with all of our policies in place, we still are throwing away a lot of stuff that could have been recycled or composted. Disposal studies are showing that 55% of what we're throwing away could have gone to recycling programs or composting programs. There's a lot of recyclable C&D debris still going to landfill. So we have some work to do. And if people participated in all of our programs correctly right now, we would have a 95% landfill diversion rate. So we hope to eventually get there, and I'll tell you how in a minute. We hope we will get to zero waste, but we hope to get to 95% very soon. So we have programs in San Francisco where we accept, I keep saying recycling and composting, but I just want to tell you what goes into our different streams. What is recyclable? Well, bottles and cans, glass, jars, most metals. Also paper, all glossy paper, newspaper, and cardboard. Also plastics. You actually don't have to look at the bottom to find that very small number within the triangle anymore. We accept all rigid plastics, except we do not accept bags, wrappers, or styrofoam. So it's really simple. If it's a hard plastic that holds its shape and it's not styrofoam, you can put it into your blue recycling bin, and we commingle all those things. All of the material gets sent to Pier 96, a material recoveries facility in San Francisco. At the material recoveries facility, things get sorted manually, mechanically. We have optical sorters. It's a huge state-of-the-art facility. If you come visit me, we can take you on a tour. But the materials get sorted into different streams, and at the end of the day, you have baled newspaper, baled metal, and it gets sent to different processors around the country, around the state, and around the world. So what's compostable in the city? We were yet again another first. I hate to brag, it sounds like I'm bragging. We were the first city in North America to accept food in our composting program. You have to have sort of a different permit at a composting facility than if you were just accepting yard debris, but we got that permit, and we accept all food, even meat, bones, and eggshells. And that was really important for us because we don't have a lot of yards in San Francisco. On a relative basis, we have a much smaller percentage of yard debris than probably you do. And we accept certified compostable plastics, like plastic bags, and these are great because they make it easy for people to participate. They can line their little green bin in their home. People can put all the material in there, tie it up, and put it right out into their bin. It keeps things nice and clean and easy to participate. Also, food-soiled paper. All food-soiled paper should be going in our green bins in San Francisco. That includes food-soiled paper plates, paper-to-go containers, and even napkins. Finally, yard debris. All of this gets sent to one of 3 facilities that's owned and operated by Recology. These facilities use a variety of different methods for processing the compostable feedstock, but they all use microbes and turning and heat to break down the food scraps and the yard debris and paper, and it turns into a beautiful, natural, very rich fertilizer in just 60 days. And the fertilizer is certified organic. It's used by a lot of different farms and vineyards around California and around the Bay Area, and it's a great way to help close the loop. It's food to food. And so what goes in your trash? Not very much. We just have a few things that are left over. Bags, wrappers, I mentioned before. ceramic, broken ceramic, a few random things, and styrofoam in the packaging form. You won't see too much styrofoam food to go containers, and mixed materials such as juice boxes, the metal, paper, and plastic we can't recycle in our city. All this trash is hauled to Altamont landfill, which is 65 miles east of San Francisco. It's a facility that's owned by Waste Management, a competitor of Recology. It's helped our recycling rate quite significantly. Our Recology does not want to send their material to their competitor. So anyway, it goes to the landfill, and we process very, very little of it. It was just 6 months ago that we were processing none. So we tell people, when you put something in your black bin, it goes to the landfill and it stays there. But the point is that you've ended the useful lifetime of a natural resource when you throw it in the landfill. We don't mine landfills, we don't process our trash, so we really like to think of things as materials coming from natural resources to reuse them as much as possible. 4 keys to success, I like to say. We have convenient programs, we have incentives, education, and policy. And so let's start with convenience. We have containers. Convenient collection carts. These are curbside carts for residents and businesses in a lot of different shapes and sizes. We have 3 simple streams. I mentioned them before, but we commingle our recycling. It makes it easy for people to participate. We put food with yard debris. So those 3 streams, we don't have 4, 5, or 6. It makes it easy to understand. We have a consistent color and function. Green, blue, black, green, blue, black. We see it everywhere you go in the city, so people recognize right away the difference between a recycling bin and a composting bin from a trash bin. So it's also codified in our mandatory recycling ordinance. Everybody, property managers, businesses, everybody has to have their bins color-coded. We also have incentives. I mentioned pay-as-you-throw earlier, but pay-as-you-throw provides huge financial benefits, particularly to commercial businesses for recycling and composting more. You get a discount off your bill based on your recycling and composting rate. People also feel good about recycling and composting. They know it conserves resources, so there's an incentive there. They're protecting nature, so they participate because they care. Education. We have a comprehensive approach to dealing with educating people, and we focus on face-to-face communication. Studies show that people remember when you communicate with them face-to-face. So we don't do very much TV media or signs on billboards or buses or radio. We don't do that very often. It's expensive and it doesn't show to change behavior. So instead, we do site visits. We provide people information for their sites, opportunities for their particular site. We audit containers and give them information on what they're doing incorrectly. We talk to property managers. I know that's me, yes. That is my property manager at my office, actually. We train custodial staff. We work with all San Francisco schools to train the next generation. And we do presentations like I'm doing today, but we also do a lot of presentations at like a staff meeting. We're frequently invited to go tell people about their new recycling bin, their new composting bin, and people really appreciate knowing what goes in there and why it's important. We do have paper outreach material that we provide. It's free of charge. You can download it from our website, or we can mail it to you or bring it to you when we do a site visit. But we focus on images versus words just because we have a multilingual population. It's a way to get around some of the language barriers. Policy. I mentioned most of our policies earlier, but I just want to go over mandatory recycling and composting briefly. There's actually penalties codified in the law. You can be fined up to $500 or have a lien on your property if you don't participate correctly. Thankfully, we have not had to fine or lien anybody yet for not putting anything in the right place. We have liened people for not having service at all. But what we do instead is we actually have a green jobs program. It's a job training program within our office where these folks go out and they look in people's trash bins very early in the morning before the truck comes by to empty the containers. And they see what's going in there. If there's some incorrect materials in there, recyclable or compostable material, they leave a little note on your bin. Then you get sent a letter. And you frequently get a visit from one of our staff. So people actually go knocking on the doors in the evenings after 6 o'clock and ask them if they received the letter. Do you have any questions? It's actually a very friendly visit, and the jobs training program, all these people come from the neighborhoods where they're doing this education, and they speak 12 languages. So they can really reach people in a way that's meaningful to them. We go back and follow up, and what we find is 80% of people change their behavior with this process. So that's why we haven't had to fine. It's an educational process. Yes, we sometimes get called the trash police, but it works. So what does the future have in store for our city? Well, consumer and producer responsibility laws. We work very closely with lobbyists at the state level to advocate for such laws. Mattresses is a bill I'm working very closely on right now with a couple of our state legislators. And we also are working on pharmaceutical take-back program with the state. These bills are generally statewide. It's very difficult to regulate things in a small municipality. So that's something that's very important to us. We also participated in an anaerobic food digestion pilot where we sent 200 tons of food-heavy compostable material to a wastewater treatment facility that had excess capacity just east of San Francisco to see how much methane they could capture from this food scraps, the city food scraps. And what they found was that it was very significant. In an environment devoid of oxygen, food scraps give off significant amounts of methane, much more than wastewater, and you're able to actually either power a facility or fuel vehicles. And our pilot test showed that we can actually fuel an entire municipal fleet and our private haulers fleet with our food scraps. So the goal is to eventually build a facility in San Francisco dedicated to our food composting program. Trash processing. I said earlier we just started processing some of the trash. So in places where people are just not source separating, they're not doing it right, we're actually looking at purchasing certain equipment with our hauling partner, Recology, to process trash. So this is one piece of equipment we purchased, and it's a bioseparator. It separates compostables from trash streams. And finally, we hope to build a zero waste facility where we can combine all of our operations to one place. Right now they're all over the place: transfer station one place, organics transfer station another place, and recycling facility elsewhere. So we hope to have a little bit more space, make things more efficient by putting it all in one location. And this is a drawing that we had recently completed with some architects, and it should be done in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's it. I hope you learned a little bit about what we're doing, and later on I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thanks for staying here, John. And Sharon, could you collect questions from folks if you haven't already? While Sharon's collecting whatever you're passing to her, lots of questions in my head, and I'm sure everybody else has them too. So this is for both of you, and it may start with you first, Julie, but John, pipe in. So, you're in a very dense community. Nashville is not dense. We have Kirby. It's a curbside pickup recycling program that doesn't do any wet stuff. We don't do compostables. It's mixed, and it's really expensive. And so how do you? I don't know what your per ton costs are, but I'd love to know per ton costs for each of those 3 streams. Yeah. And is it just a matter of density or what?
So our per ton costs for recyclables, compostables, and trash are about the same in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. They're about $140 per ton. Wow. So that includes the whole system.
Hang on a second. Can we get some of these microphones off because we're getting feedback?
I know. Yeah, I was hearing that too earlier.
Oh, okay. If you get closer to yours too,
okay.
So you put that close to you. Then. Okay.
I thought I had a loud enough voice, but I will talk to the microphone. So $140 per ton on average, but it's actually all of our streams cost about the same. And we charge, the way we're able to fund our program is through ratepayers. So everybody, like I said earlier, gets a trash bill, and they fund all three of the streams, even though they're paying more for their trash. But all ratepayers actually, they fund quite a few programs, including my salary. Yeah.
So what's the per ton cost so the black box is per ton, so they get that. John, what do you see across the country on averages on a curbside program? I mean, this is residential we're talking about.
Yeah, obviously, if you have large population density, you had to get economies of scale, which are very, very significant. The average, I don't have a nationwide average, but I hear numbers that range from $30 to $40 a ton up to $70 to $80 a ton. Depending upon how well they do it and the economies of scale that they can produce.
Mm-hmm. And that's for curbside recycling?
Curbside recycling and processing.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Just to clarify, for San Francisco, what $140 per ton means to most single-family homes is it's $34 a month.
34? Mm-hmm. So every resident pays that, and
Yes.
if you're in an apartment building, every apartment pays that, or is it?
It's the apartment owner.
multi-dwelling,
Usually,
yeah,
sometimes they can pass it on to
right,
the tenants,
right.
but yeah.
Okay, so I have lots of questions here, but it looks like I'm going to go one from each. We have them; they're separated between the two of you.
Mm-hmm.
So, John, I'm going to ask you. So, what is the financial membership contribution between SWANA and the WT industry players? I assume they're meaning do the big companies.
Right, we have no big companies as members of SWANA. As I said previously, we have individuals from those companies as members of SWANA. Our membership dues are, for people from the private sector, about $280. People from the public sector, it's $190. But all of our revenues come from individual member dues and the programs that we put on. We don't receive monies from any of the companies or from any agency.
Thank you. So, Julie, I'm going to bounce back and forth here. There was a question about how much in 2012, how much actually went to the landfill?
Oh,
How many-
so
how
we
many
haven't
tons?
calculated those numbers yet.
I see.
Yeah.
Um,
So 2010 is the most recent year we have numbers.
Okay.
And we,
Okay.
although it may be done very soon, but maybe even by the time I get back, actually, yeah,
good,
for
good.
2011.
So I did want to tell you that we actually do have pay-as-you-throw now.
Oh, you do? Oh, good.
July 1st. It was,
There-
it's not quite, I would say, as sophisticated. I'm looking back at Sharon as what you have in San Francisco, but we're
Oh, great. I didn't realize that.
we're
Yeah.
inching along. So, boy, this is a long question. I'm gonna have to digest this one. So, I think for both of you, we're assuming that we can get copies of your presentations. Yeah. So, Sharon, can we post them on the? I don't know how you do that. Can we post them on the Public Works? Zero waste, right? Thank you. Okay. So I think we've not had a good history necessarily with the thermal plant here.
I know that.
And I think some of the audience, and I have to admit, I was one of them, just wanted to, that was a rough go, and we weren't very happy. Of course, it burned down at the end. So and it was an old technology. I'm assuming that you're saying the new technologies are, the fifth generation from that.
They are, and there have been unsuccessful waste-to-energy operations as well. Harrisburg is one, Detroit is another. But it's generally the management of the technology that causes the problems, not the technology. If you invest in maintenance, if you invest in repair, if they're designed well, and if you operate them well, you can operate them cost-effectively. If you don't do that, you could have major problems. If you finance it incorrectly, where you don't finance it through revenue bonds, if you finance it through general obligation bonds, if you finance it through revenue bonds, the bond community looks at the facility and will not issue the bond unless they think the facility is going to be economically feasible. If you finance it that way, you have a better chance of it being successful. But there have been good and bad examples of it, but it's basically how well you manage it.
Thank you. And San Francisco is a unique city. So I kind of pointed to both of you with this, and this is my own question, but, you know, you were talking about some of the policies. I'm just curious about, you know, I guess, John, you look across the country and say, so which policies, in terms of really moving towards a more, you know, we would say zero waste, which policies do you see working well? And not necessarily in the San Franciscos, but in the Nashvilles. And then I'd turn to you and say, so what policies were the easiest for you to pass, and which ones were the hardest?
Answer. Which ones are the easiest ones?
Yeah, we had a huge battle with plastic bags, although, you know, that's such a small percentage of our waste stream. It was more of a symbolic gesture around not wanting something that clogs our recycling facilities and is not acceptable in our recycling composting program. That was a real battle with the plastic bag industry. Mandatory recycling and composting was surprisingly easy, partly because other jurisdictions had passed mandatory recycling programs such as New York, and San Francisco never wants to be behind New York. Especially not on environmental issues, yeah.
See, I think the most important thing is establishment of the infrastructure to do the recycling and the composting. I think mandatory recycling or mandatory composting sounds kind of drastic, but the reason it's successful is because the infrastructure is there, that people can use it, it's affordable, that it's convenient, it's understandable. They spend a lot of effort with respect to public education. So local governments need to invest in the infrastructure, the education, and the implementation of it. The policies that drive it can help it, but they can't substitute for it. I know some communities have banned landfilling of waste in their community. What that basically means is the landfill takes place somewhere else. It goes to a community where there's no ban, or it goes to another country where there's no ban. But what you need is the infrastructure that's affordable.
And thank you. And just thinking about, you know, we have in Nashville, we have a commercial and we have our municipal, our residential, and they're different, right? And so in a way, what we, as on this board, and what Sharon and her team really mostly deal with, which we have really purview over, is, and even it's limited, but on the residential side. I mean, like in San Francisco, it sounds like it's all one, right? And how many places are all one, and how many are not? And in the all one, everybody pays the same, I take it. So there's a bunch of questions.
In most municipalities, large cities, most large cities, municipal government is responsible for collection of residential, and private sector is responsible for collection of commercial. Sometimes that's through a franchise where they have to have a license, and sometimes it's just open market where anybody can hire anybody, any commercial establishment can hire any hauler that they want. Other times it has to be licensed or franchised. So that's how it's roughly split. I think this is one of the few cities that I've heard where one private company does both residential and commercial collection. Now, the processing facility can be all over the place. The processing facility could be a private facility that the local government uses and pays a tipping fee, or it can be a local government facility that the haulers coming from the commercial establishments can pay a tipping fee, and that's mixed all over the country.
Yeah, there's actually a few examples of some jurisdictions in Northern California moving towards one hauler for all refuse collection, and one in particular is San Jose. Now, they had a bidding process unlike San Francisco, but city of San Jose, which is larger in population, significantly larger in population than San Francisco, is doing that because they recognize the benefit of having some consistency throughout the city. And in Northern California, actually, there's very few jurisdictions where the municipal government is managing residential collection. I know it's not the case throughout the United States. The only one I can think of throughout the Bay Area that does that is Berkeley. And so it's very, very common to have private haulers doing both.
Okay. They had more questions for you, Joey. So this question is, so there apparently you spoke about the events that lead to recycling and composting that were required in your 2009 ordinance. What are those? And if you could give some examples. So
Events that led to,
in your 2009 ordinance, I'm not quite sure what this means, but maybe.
Excuse me, I wrote the question.
Okay.
It's in your 2001 article. You have a list of bullet points. And it says that the ordinance requires events for recycling and composting.
so the mandatory recycling and composting
Right here.
law requires events to provide containers.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what those are. Please explain what they are.
You're asking me to
The
explain.
athletic events and.
Yeah, so
Those-
all
yeah.
events in San Francisco, actually, when you pay for a permit with the permit provider, it's part of the permit that you're required to provide collection containers and pay for refuse collection for the event attendees. Does that answer your question? Okay. Hey, I wrote this.
So a question on, we wrestle with C&D waste. We have pretty much our class one stuff goes, it doesn't stay in Davidson County, it goes to two main facilities. We have 2 C&D facilities within the county, and it's probably been some of the most strenuous stuff we've had to deal with. Is how do we deal with that? We have, as a board, have said C&D doesn't count as diversion. So we don't count that toward, in our percent recycling, and neither does incineration. But you talked about some of the issues of C&D, and I'd like to hear from both of you about what you see are the most effective policies to move C&D to get it, wherever it is, in kind of in the food chain from where it's generated to where it's finally disposed to get better recycling.
Well, one of the difficulties with C&D is if it's mixed, and all the different materials are mixed, then you need some sort of a separation facility that's going to sort the different materials and do it in a way that the products are not contaminated. If you can work with the generators of the material, mainly construction sites, where they can separate the wallboard from the wood, from the plastics, from the other metals, and from the shingles, the asphalt shingles, and the other types of things, and have those collected separately, you can get very good products, and it can work effectively. You can build a facility that will sort the material from each other. And I guess your operations that you had a slide up there was doing that. But it is an issue of cost and how clean the material is going to be.
Any comments?
Yeah, I think our ordinance is interesting because it's very simple. There's only one person administering the entire ordinance. A lot of jurisdictions have these like bonds, and you can't get your money back until you've demonstrated either source separation or sending the materials to a mixed recovery facility. And our ordinance is just very simple to understand. It's, the one person reaches out to every transporter and every facility every year, all the time. And so people understand how it works, and contractors understand how it works. When you get a permit to do a demolition, to do any construction, you get information on how to use a registered transporter. So it's pretty simple in San Francisco.
So does the registered transporters, do they require, hey, you got to separate, like you're asking, that you say, John, or can they?
If you're
do
a
whatever they're
registered
gonna do?
transporter, just commits to, when they're hauling mixed debris, that they're taking it to a facility that diverts
see.
material.
I see. Okay.
So
That's
that
right.
they're
You
not
go to a
taking
mixed-
it just
right.
to the landfill.
Got it.
Yeah, and you can actually you can actually improve your waste diversion rate, get much higher than 65% if you're source separating on site. And a lot of buildings, construction projects have shown they can get like 95% landfill diversion by doing that.
All right, well, that seems like it could be a juicy area for us. But one of the issues I think that we all have questions about is how good is the data? You were throwing up a lot of different data out there, John, and Julie, you were too. And so, something that we're always struggling is who, kind of who's counting and who they counting it for, and how, what is how do you do any kind of QA, QC on the accounting on this? Are there any principles,
on a
John?
facility basis, a facility by facility basis? You have to do waste analysis as well as just weighing the materials. So you have to do sorting on a periodic basis to try and get an understanding of composition. You have to keep very good records of the material flows and the weight and volume of the material. And you can get very good data on a facility basis. And a community can get very good data if they have all of the facilities doing that. It's when you assemble it together and when you start putting information from different states and different jurisdictions together, it becomes less valuable.
So the state of California, there is some controversy around data collection for waste diversion, and one of the big ones is they allow what's called alternative daily cover to be counted as recycling. Does everybody know what that is? It's when you're required at a landfill to cover a landfill every day to prevent things from blowing around and a whole bunch of other things. And so if you use something such as the fines from a construction and demolition debris recovery facility, you can use that to cover and you get recycling credit. Now, LA has been notorious for using yard debris as alternative daily cover for years and years and years. And people are very much heavily criticized LA for doing that because people, when they put their yard debris in a green bin, think, oh, it's going to compost or mulch. And in reality, in a lot of cases, it wasn't. It was going as a landfill cover. So the state stopped counting landfill diversion in 2009, I believe. And they actually only require municipalities to submit the landfill tonnage. So what's really interesting about San Francisco, while we still calculate our diversion rate every year, we don't send any yard debris to landfill as an alternative daily cover. We do have about 5% of our recycling rate is alternative daily cover. But the landfill rate is going down dramatically, and that's really positive. It just shows us we're still moving in the right direction. So that's kind of the history of those numbers in California.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
It's that type of distinction that makes it very, very difficult to compare one community to another. If one community allows counting alternative daily cover as recycling and another community doesn't, you really can't compare their recycling rates. They're not counting the same things.
Something that you said, John, and we've gone round and round in here about it, is, do we really need to do a waste stream study? And
Do we really need
do a waste stream study? And it's like, I think there's a feeling like, yeah, we should do it. Yeah, it's expensive. And it's like, so how do, and so, all right, we're gonna go with the EPA numbers for a resident. I mean, and what's your experiences? What are your suggestions?
I would never use the EPA numbers on a case-by-case basis in a local situation. I would at least do volumes and weights. And I think you can probably do periodic sampling, maybe several times a year, where you spend a week or two trying to get composition, and over time you can get better and better data. The EPA numbers are just extremely rough, and I wouldn't even design a landfill using those numbers in terms of the quantity per person per year. It's going to vary all over the country.
Yeah.
You got to measure and you got to sample.
We agree that they're very expensive. We do them very rarely, probably once a decade or longer. Yeah, I mean, we do once every. The last time we did one, we did one pretty recently, but the time before it was a long time ago. We feel that they're really expensive, and we understand what's going in our trash. I mean, if you we already all know what we're doing wrong just by anybody who's familiar with, observing trash cans. I mean, the guys that pick up guys and maybe girls who pick up the garbage can tell you what's going in there. So when we already know what our challenges is, what we're doing wrong, I think you can already start to attack some of the problems with that anecdotal information versus scientific representative samples of data.
You know yours. So kind of another thing that we haven't figured out very well, and maybe Sharon's team has, and I just don't understand it very well. But when we have these apartment buildings, right? So these lots of people, and we have new apartments and we have old apartment buildings. So when you're looking at what are the strategies you see that work in apartment buildings? Are there different strategies for new buildings, maybe built after 2009, versus the older ones? How's that working, and how do you see what are some good adaptations?
You have to work with the building supervisor to devise a system for that building. And there's a number of different things that can be done in terms of recycling receptacles, put it in a common area, and other types of things. If you can design the building where you have chutes, a new building where you have actual chutes for recycling, that can make it even easier. But you have to work on almost a building by building basis.
Yeah, that's the most difficult sector in San Francisco to reach. People,
And you have a lot of
I think of it as like the tragedy of the commons a little bit. It's this common shared container, and usually people are not paying directly for it, so they don't feel any sort of responsibility to do the right thing. Some people do, but the chutes are a real problem too. If it's much more convenient to throw something away through the chute, you're not going to walk your recycling and composting down the steps. So we actually require new construction to have either a diverter, you press a button at the chute and it either goes composting, recycling, or trash. Yeah, they're pretty cool and pretty simple little systems actually. Or have 3 streams or none at all. So a lot of buildings just opt to go with no chutes at all. And we just want people to make all 3 as convenient as the other, because convenience is key. And we do a lot of training with multifamily people. We go and knock on apartment owners' doors or apartment dwellers' doors.
Thank you. So one final question before we get to this is the penultimate questions for you. But, so you talked both a little about composting, and when I hear that, I hear food waste, I think wet dry. I don't know if that's the same terms. We've had talk about it here, and some of the advocates are really, that this is important, and it sounds very attractive. So talk about kind of what have you seen as the challenges of that? And obviously, I think we saw a bunch of the upside to that, but kind of the challenges, especially on the front end, getting it started, getting them, so what do you see, both of you out
That's
there?
another approach that's being used, wet dry, in a number of communities. It's easy for people to understand. There may be some wet materials that are put in with the compostables that are contaminating the wet materials, so you have that issue you have to deal with. But it is an option.
Yeah, it's an option. We did that in the past at some facilities, and it was successful. You get very dirty material, unfortunately, and that's the drawback. You have to do a lot more processing, which can be expensive. Wet dry is also, I would say, people, I don't completely understand it. I think they sort of do, so that's why you get the contamination.
I see.
Yeah. But, there's an ick factor in composting that I want to acknowledge, that that was a big barrier to getting participation. And we've overcome a lot of that, surprisingly. We always tell people, remind them, and it's all the same material you've always been throwing away. We're just asking you to put it into a different bin. So you can still use a bag. So it's just kind of thinking about things a little bit differently. But the food scraps in a separate bin idea can be hard for some people to take. They think of rodents and bugs, and it's hard to overcome. But you just remind them it's the same stuff. You take it out every day, just like you would take out trash, or every other day, as frequently as you would have the trash.
Okay, thank you. So I've run out of questions from the audience. So the final question is: so now that you know Nashville really intimately, both of you.
Chairman, I have a question.
Okay.
You indicated, Julie, that in your education program is more face-to-face and you get more results. How costly is that compared to the advertising and so forth?
We don't do very much advertising at all. Yeah, we've.
And how many staff do you have to do that, I guess, too?
So we partner with the Human Services Agency in San Francisco, who works with some people on welfare and moving them away from welfare and towards jobs. And so we do this job training program in conjunction with the Human Services Agency, and it's been very successful. And we were able to get quite a few staff working on our programs as a result. So there's actually 12 people doing outreach, face-to-face outreach with apartments, with single-family homes in particular, and businesses actually. But they have been incredibly successful at getting results by just visiting people at the place of business, at their home, and helping answer questions. So it's been really, 12 people is a lot for a lot of places. I recognize that, but it's been very valuable.
You're seeing the entire 12 people back there in the back. It's a little bit different. So the question is, so obviously you don't know Nashville well, but looking at what, I mean, the little of you know of us, our 10-year plan is to divert 60%. I don't know what we're at, 35 with everything maybe. But of course, we really don't know what's happening in the commercial sector, so some of that is just our best guess based on what we know. But I mean, and if you're going to say, here are three things, kind of the lowest hanging fruit that we think that are really good things to do that aren't going to either, for all the reasons you can think of, political reasons or financial reasons, those are the two biggest ones, maybe some cultural reasons, that you would say, you got to try these, you got to take a look at these. So what would you leave us with?
You got to get beyond bottles and cans and newspaper, and you got to get to commercial generators. You've got to get to C&D. And you've got to get to organics. That's where the big areas for improvements
Commercial,
are.
C&D, and organic, okay.
Yeah, I would say C&D is a huge one if you can get that, if you can get a program for that. That's a significant percentage of our tons in San Francisco. Containers, do you say you do have curbside containers for people for recycling?
Mhm.
And what about yard waste? What do people do with that?
We get it picked up kind of 4 times a year, 4 times a year.
Okay.
Everybody gets an email. They're
Yeah.
coming around. If you miss it, you miss it, and it sits in your backyard until they come again.
Right. That's okay, you're composting in your backyard. But yeah, I would say, some of the 4 components I talked about earlier, convenience, incentives, and adopting sort of a goal that helps drive people in the direction of planning for these programs. But, also having the infrastructure, working with, it's the local government hauler and your any private haulers you have on developing infrastructure so that people can put certain things into their recycling bins and composting bins is important.
Well, we have our work cut out for us, but I want to thank both of you for coming, and I'm sure folks may just corner you on the way out and have a few other questions. That thank you both. This was very helpful. Before we give them applause, just want to know we're going to have another session coming up on the 13th. Will Sager, who is with the Southeast Recycling Development Council, is going to be here, and right at that same time as the recycling conference. Is that right? Yes. Okay, so that's on August 13th. Board, we're going to have a meeting to talk about all this. We're not quite sure when. We can't have board. There's some board members who can't be here on the 27th of August, so we're going to see when we get everybody here. With that, John, Julie, thank you very much.